He likes them young, impressionable, thirsty. That's why he wasn't checking for nobody in Nikki's crew. He's also smarter than he was back in the day. So he ain't going for nobody that they introduce him to. He like to be the one doing the chasing. I'm sending Star in. And I've already given her all the information she needs to be everything that he wants. And then it's off with that nigga's head. This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Genesis, Part 8. When we left off, the family and everyone connected with them were in the process of adjusting to their new routines and their relocations. While there were clearly internal issues that had yet to be resolved, Mrs. Nadira Ali had not knocked Miss Bernie's head between the washer and the dryer, and Chantal had put a cork in her attempts to save her brother Sincere's soul. For Sincere's part, he was on pins and needles because it was time for the men's meeting and he had no idea what to expect. He didn't know if these men was going to all dogpile on top of him or if his ego was going to sustain more damage at the hands of his family and their friends. The fact that Saint had agreed to go didn't even provide him with any relief because while Saint was more introverted, less vocal, and kept the details of his personal life to himself, it was kind of obvious that he was more in tune with the goings-on in relationships than his big brother was. With all of the men gathered, Q said, "I know it's been a long time, fellas, and you have no idea how awkward this is for me. All of these years have passed, and I still expect my pops to come in and say." And in unison, LJ and Donovan said, "All right, ladies, take a seat. Let's see if I can turn you all into men after all." And the room erupted. Q said, "Right, so I'm not the only one. Well, here we all are, and I guess I'm leading this meeting. We got 3 new people in the room. Only 2 of them got a drink and a cigar." And everyone chuckled and looked over at Michael. Why said, "What exactly did the young bull do to get a chair?" Q said, "Hopefully he hasn't done anything yet, but he's been real mannish around my house, making demands and calling me to the carpet, so I figured it was time." Donovan asked, "So you agreed to let him take the PYT to the spring dance on Friday?" Q said, "I did." And Michael said, "Yes!" He started pumping the air and squealing. Donovan said, Whoa, what you doing? Man up, nigga. You ain't got to do all that." He pops a head nod and say, "Thanks." When Michael did as Donovan instructed, LJ said, wait, hold up, godson. You ain't any less of a man because you get excited. Then he looked at Donovan and said, "Stop confusing the boy. I distinctly remember a men's meeting right before your first date with Maribel, after you embarrassed yourself in your sister-in-law's study." Donovan, who'd been laughing hysterically, quickly stopped. And Michael asked, "What happened?" Q said, "I don't know that your Aunt Maribel would want me to tell you that story." And again, everyone erupted in laughter. Donovan said, "Nephew, let's just say that day should have told me not to fumble her." Donovan and Maribel had gotten really acquainted in Angela's study at her estate in Dallas. And the Queen Mother caught Maribel with her skirt up and Donovan with his pants down. And they hadn't even had a first date. Q said, "Pops dropped some jewels that day, and Sincere is here because he needs similar counsel. But I'm going to let that man speak for himself." When Sincere asked how much he could say and what he shouldn't, Michael said, "My grandpops took me and Uncle D on a fishing trip when I was 12 and said that was the day I became a man. If y'all gonna hold out on me, then what was the point of bringing me here?" Q said, "See what I'm talking about? Mannish." And as the chuckles died down, Sincere told all of the men about Natalia, his pursuit of her, and their disastrous first date. He was surprised that the men listened without judgment. For all of their clowning and teasing, when everybody was initially gathered, they were all well aware that the stakes were high. Since none of them knew Sincere all that well and none had had the opportunity to spend as much time with him as Q had given them the tab. So when Sincere said, "What I don't understand is how I'm supposed to be myself while at the same time saying and doing all the right things to keep her from running for the hills," LJ was prepared. He said, "I don't know how much you know about me and my wife and Shotty's friendship. All their lives, LJ had called Angela Shotty. But they are my oldest friends. They both seen me at my best and at my worst. They knew me when I was a philandering football player. When Regina and I decided that we was going to make a go of it, we already knew each other pretty well. But we'd never known one another in that capacity. It was years between us getting together and us getting married because I had a whole lot to learn and a whole lot of growing to do. We knew we wanted to be together, but had we taken that leap before I did the work, we wouldn't be where we are right now. I wouldn't have had the tools I needed to sustain it. Q said, and you'd be dead. Sincere said, big ups to beating cancer twice. LJ said, thanks, but that ain't what he talking about. My wife would have killed me if I would have tried to pull any of that BS that I'd pulled on other broads before she and I got together. I told you she knew me. She knew how I gave it up. Sincere asked, so you changed for her? LJ said, nah, I changed for me, for the life and the love that I wanted, for the children that I wanted her to give me one day. But she was one of my best friends. If the relationship ain't work out, I couldn't let it be because I did her dirty, because I mishandled my best friend. If she was gonna dump me, I still needed her to be my friend. And if it was gonna end, I ain't want to end up in a pine box. Sincere asked, so how you get the game? Your pops? LJ said, nah, my pops died when I was a kid. My junior year, a recruiter from the police department in my town showed up at my school with a new recruit that he just made. That recruit happened to also be my frat brother. He was cool as hell, and we became fast friends. He welcomed me into his family, and I welcomed him into mine. And then he looked at Q. Sincere asked, oh, that's how you met Angela? Q said, nope. We were friends for over a decade, and I barely was in the same room with the girl twice. Not to mention I was engaged and she was married. But I introduced LJ to my pops, and my pops took a liking to him. They built a relationship independent of me. Then LJ shared some words of wisdom that he got from Pops Andy. When Sincere said, but that was different because you already knew her and she was already interested. Not to mention, you grew up without your pops, so it's understandable that you ain't really know. I had a father, and the only thing he told me about women was to smell it first and always use a condom. When all of the men finished laughing, Donovan said, don't feel bad. The one time I asked your pops for some advice about what to do with a chick, that man told me to dump the girl, push up on her sister, and stage it so she'd catch me in the bed with her. That man actually told me that the girl would want me back. Sincere said, it's probably a good thing you ain't listened to him. And Q and LJ fell out laughing. Sincere said, what? Q said, you know he listened to him. Donovan said, hey, it worked though. Q said, that is not the kind of advice that this man needs. Sincere said, she do got a sister though. And all of the men fell out laughing. Donovan said, I had St. Andy as a father. He was always there, always talking. But he ain't just talk. He walked the walk. He loved the heaven and hell out of Medea. And I thought he was a simp. I thought all these niggas were simps. I ain't never have to work that hard to get no girl. It wasn't until Maribel that I understood that these corny niggas didn't do what they did just to impress they women. That treating a woman well was a cheat code. Happy wife, happy life. Why I said, I'd beg to differ. Happy spouse, happy house. It gotta go both ways. Donovan said, uh-oh, trouble in paradise. Why I said, nah. At first, though, I did resent the fact that you sat me down, Q. But then when I thought about it, I realized that this is a chance for me to show my wife how it's done. Getting up going to work every day while she's sitting in the house is rubbing her the wrong way. Q said, my sentiments exactly. Why I said, nigga. Q said, I wish I could take the credit for it, but I'm married to Big Ange. She put a bug in my ear and suggested your wife needed a little more FaceTime. She also told me not to put you on to the play. She had faith in you, nigga. She said that you'd pick up what I was putting down and see the wisdom in it and use it. Donovan said, well, his mama did name him Wisdom, so it'd be a damn shame for him to have a name like that and be the complete opposite. Because all the chicks I've ever known named Angel was devils in disguise. Q said, whoa, be easy. I got a son named Angel. LJ said, and he bad as hell. And then both Sincere and Michael got some wisdom from all of the men who were gathered for the men's meeting. They both asked questions and got some tough answers. And the men did not hold back because Michael was present. If his father thought that he was mature enough for the meeting, then he was mature enough for everything that they had to say. And while Saint did more listening than he did talking, he felt right at home. He could see similarities between his brother Sincere and his cousin Donovan. And he found a kindred spirit in Q. And when the meeting was done, the men enjoyed dinner, catered by the same Trinidadian restaurant where Sincere would be taking Natalia on Friday night. The women were not having a complimentary meeting, though. They were all doing their own thing. The Queen Mother was at the Lopez estate in Dallas, strategizing with Idra. As much as he'd wanted to be at the meeting with the men, he needed to work with the Queen Mother because the Charles organization's numbers were really small. After Operation Last Touch, resulted in the death or relief of duty of a number of his soldiers and lieutenants. Salima was at her house, up to no good, connecting with the female team of finishers, who she'd assigned to do her dirty work in New York. Maribel was in Denver, checking on True and helping Angela with a plan that she put in place to connect True and Stephanie remotely. Anya, Regina, and Chantal were with the children. The grandmother crew and Mrs. Ali had been relieved for the day, and with the men meeting and all of the women otherwise disposed, it was on those three to hold it down. But their babysitting duties served more than one purpose. Angela had asked Regina and Anya to pick Chantal's brain, see where her head was, figure out if there was a way that they could support her, and make her feel more included in the family. Angela wasn't there herself, because she was with Big Wood. Q had expressed concern about Big Wood being isolated. While his work as a finisher had prepared him for such periods of isolation, Q knew just how important it was for Big Wood to be involved in the goings-on throughout the family. He felt like the more involved they could get him, the sooner he'd be back on his feet. So unbeknownst to the fellas, Q had taken in a small recording device to the meeting. Angela had gone to Miss Charlotte's house, and she tapped into that recording device, providing Big Wood with a bird's ear view of the men's meeting. When the men broke for dinner, Angela and Big Wood had a conversation of sorts about the situation with True. For the first time, Big Wood shared with Angela that it was, in fact, True who'd saved his life in that alley. To that point, True had not confirmed that she'd left the estate in Denver and traveled back to Texas during Operation Last Touch. Also, for the first time, Big Wood asked about Amira. Now, he'd only verbally said a few words, as his communication was still being affected by his aphasia. But he was using the tablet to communicate pretty well. Miss Charlotte, Q, and Angela had a discussion, and they'd agreed that they would tell Big Wood the absolute truth about any and everything that he asked about. So when Big Wood asked what happened to Amira, Angela told him about Amira's confession, about the letter that Wise received with the photos, and that Amira had never been heard from again. When Big Wood asked via the tablet how Amira went from getting snatched from the Queen Mother's cabin to overseas on the beach, Angela just shook her head. She said, "Wood, I have no idea." Big Wood said, using the tablet, "Yes, you do." When Angela questioned it, Wood verbally said, "True." And Angela gave no response. True had neither confirmed nor denied that she was behind Amira's disappearance. When Angela told Wood that True had never admitted to leaving Denver, Big Wood said, "Ask Bosch." Wood knew that on Friday there would be a roundtable, and Bosch would be giving a debrief. And whether he wanted to or not, he'd be forced to answer all questions posed about any activities that he was involved in, not just about what happened at Angela and Stephanie's estate in Denver. Meanwhile, in Puerto Rico, Stephanie was overjoyed. She'd just seen True via video conference for the first time in months. She was so happy to see that her best friend didn't look any worse for the wear. And while Stephanie was able to update True on all that had been going on in her life, True unfortunately didn't have much of an update to give. When she told Stephanie about the invasion of the estate, from her point of view, Stephanie was pissed. She said, "I am so pissed at Salima. She should have handled that situation with Hanifa when she had her and her father in Texas. You know about that, right?" True said, "I heard." Stephanie said, "Because if she would have handled it, the traffickers would have never been able to get to them and use them to get to you. What I want to know is, did they have something on Taryn or somebody high up in his org? Or did they use the situation with Amira and Salima beating the brakes off Hanifa to convince them to turn snake? Because Taryn's family, his crew, everybody, they all eating because Salima connected them. Why in the hell would he bite the hand that feeds him?" True said, "Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the fact that Salima played Taryn for a damn fool. Remember, that's how he got connected with the Baptiste in the first place. And you know Salima's mouth is slick. She probably chewed that nigga up and spit him out when she got him to Texas. Now, we surrounded by Caribbeans and Hispanics. But let's be honest, Jamaicans is spiteful as hell. When the families was looking for a replacement for the Ramirez's, they was begging for a seat at the table. And I remember your Uncle Manny saying that the Jamaicans could work for them, but not with them." Stephanie said, "Right, because they turn on their own if they could get something out of it. That's why Taryn needed to connect in the first place." When the conversation ended, Stephanie had her mind made up. She was calling Salima, and she was holding her personally responsible for not only handling the Jamaicans, but finding out why and how They managed to get connected to the trafficking organization. She also needed her to find out how they'd found True, because if Pastor Tanya and her family were in danger, Stephanie expected Selima to be the one to keep them safe. Yes, Angela was handling it, but as far as Stephanie was concerned, it was Wise who brought Amira into their lives in the first place. And Selima posed as Talia, who would play Taryn like a damn fiddle. And that's why Selima was at the house scheming when the men were at their meeting. Because when Stephanie called Selima, she said, "You know I'll kill a nigga, a broad, or whoever behind my best friend, right?" Selima said, "Of course I do." Stephanie said, "You know that includes you, right?" Selima said, "Stephanie, don't do that." Stephanie said, "Don't do what? Don't hold you responsible for that play that the Jamaicans put down?" "Yeah, no. You so busy fighting with Wise and the Queen Mother, and how I hear it, you fighting with my sister too, over you being sat down, as if it ain't nothing you can do from the house. You better get on it, Selima." Selima said, "I already am. I was before the whole situation happened in Denver." Stephanie said, "Then what the hell went wrong?" Selima said, "Taryn obviously learned from his experience with me. The minute Wise told me about Hanifa, and I put two and two together and figured out that she was the same Hanifa that I'd known when Taryn was my mark, I sent Nikki and the girls in. They did what they do and finessed their way into romances with people in his org. They played them close, but they played them easy, so they didn't get a whole lot of information about their plans. I sent them with a team, so surveillance was a piece of cake. But they never got wind of their planned operation in Denver. They weren't connected with any of the men that Taryn ended up sending in. I also had someone on Hanifa. I know for a fact she's not involved in the Cato organization, so she didn't pull this string. Now, what I do know is the operation was absolutely planned by Taryn himself. And while none of the ladies were able to connect with him, I got something for that." Stephanie said, "Well, you better. Run it by me. Maybe I can help you shore it up." Then Selima told Stephanie all about her plan to get a woman in Taryn's bed. Selima said, "He likes them young, impressionable, thirsty. That's why he wasn't checking for nobody in Nikki's crew. He's also smarter than he was back in the day. So he ain't going for nobody that they introduce him to. He like to be the one doing the chasing. I'm sending Star in. She's going to pretend to be one of the ladies' little sisters in town for spring break. And I've already given her all the information she needs to be everything that he wants." Stephanie said, "And then?" Selima said, "And then it's off with that nigga's head." At the same time, Angela was watching Big Wood, pushing himself to the max in his second round of physical therapy for the day. She was aware of the fact that he'd gone up to 2-a-days earlier in the week, but this was the first time that she'd seen just how hard it was on him. And the first time she'd seen just how hard he was working. It seemed like the time that she spent with him had invigorated him. And she wasn't 100% sure what part was the catalyst for the strenuous work he was putting his body through. Was it overhearing the men's meeting? The discussion about True saving his life? The unanswered questions around Amira's disappearance while carrying his baby? Or her being forced to tell him that it was highly likely that at the conclusion of the roundtable meeting on Friday, Bosch would be sent back in as True security. When Stacks had a conversation with Bosch about all of his options, Bosch was adamant that he had to keep his word to Big Wood. He had to stay with True, make sure she was good, and be there with her when their baby came into the world. He did not want to be reassigned, and he was not ready for a vacation. The doctors had reported that he was healing well, and thanks to True's emergency medical attention, he would be ready to return to work in only a matter of days. When Angela had asked Wood how he felt about that, Big Wood had said, "Send him back." Angela said, "Well, you know, I have the final say, and if you say that you don't," Wood said, "Send him back." And Angela knew he meant every word that he managed to say. So while she watched him struggle to put one foot in front of the other, she prayed that even if Big Wood didn't get 100% back to normal, he'd at least be well enough to get to Denver before Bosch and True spent any more time alone. While she didn't know anything about their intimate moment in that panic room, she was aware of the fact that when Stacks and the crew made entry to that panic room, True had used her shirt as a tourniquet and a pressure dressing when she'd rendered Bosch aid, which meant True was topless when the men arrived. And even though they were all professionals, and True was very pregnant, tatas were tatas, and Bosch had a bird's eye view. She knew what the streets were saying about brutal Bosch, and she knew her little sister's best friend True. And like she prayed her up, True called. In that very moment, when Angela answered, True said, "Angela, I just want to thank you for arranging that video call between me and Stephanie. She needed it, and so did I. No pressure, but I cannot wait for all of this to be over." Miss Charlotte offered for me and the baby to stay with her after the baby's born, and I've decided to take her up on that offer. She told me that she and Samuel have a house there in Denton, and whether all of this drama with the traffickers is over or not, she's not only willing to let me and the baby stay there, but she'll stay there with us. And I think that me and this baby are both gonna need her. And Angela was relieved. When True stopped talking abruptly, Angela was confused. She said, "What's the matter?" True said, "That song. Why you listening to that?" Big Wood had taken to listening to old school hip hop as he did physical therapy. And when it got real tough, he'd play a song that he'd played for True and told her that it always made him think of her whenever he was putting in work, whenever they were apart. It was the very song that got him through the days when he was in hiding at the cabin that he purchased in Denver, the same cabin where she was held up. But Angela couldn't have known that. She was having this conversation in the same room where Big Wood was getting his physical therapy in, and he couldn't have known who she was on the phone with. She also could not have known that her prayer that God keep True and Bosch from making a bad decision was being answered through that song.
Times when I'm lost, I try to find you. You know to give me space when it's time to. My heart's dictionary defines you. It's love and happiness.